This is why you should always lock your doors. Two teenage girls were working the night shift at a Pizza Hut when they realized it was 11 o'clock, meaning that it was time to close up shop. They turned off the lights, locked the doors, and began to walk outside. But as they approached their car, they realized that there was an old lady sitting in the front passenger seat. One of the girls opened the driver's side door and asked the old woman, "Can I help you?" before getting in. To which she replied, "I just need a ride home." The girls then told her that they needed to go back inside to call their moms and tell them that they'd be late. They immediately ran back inside, locked the doors, and proceeded to call the police, who showed up about 10 minutes later and arrested her. As it turns out, it was actually a 47-year-old man dressed up like an old woman, and the police found drugs and a knife on his body.
I want to talk about this because I think it's important for as much information to be shared as possible, but there is an active serial killer operating in Stockton, California right now. He appears to be targeting Latino men walking alone late at night, and these are the areas that the 5 shootings this year happened in. But then 2 days ago, the Stockton police said 2 shootings last year were also done by the same person. This image is the only image that police have of him, but a woman who was shot last year and survived said that he's about 6 foot tall, was wearing a black mask and black clothing. So please, please, please help get word out about this, especially if you know any Latino men in Stockton, California right now. I'm going to show you the video that this clip is from, and it includes a phone number for any tips that anyone might have.
When the kidnapper made me guess where he kept my daughter, I went for the basement and he said, "Correct," allowing me to see her. But when I found her severed head in there, I learned that every other choice would have been correct as well. I told her there was no monster in my closet, as I picked her up and told her that she could sleep with us tonight. I figured that was the safest way of getting out of the house, without the man realizing that I saw him. All my life, my parents told me not to open the basement door, but I got curious and disobeyed them. What is that glowing ball in the sky? And why does it hurt my eyes?
Have you ever wondered how accurate police sketches are? I'm going to show you a couple police sketches, and then we're going to see what the people looked like when they were actually caught. And I cover all sorts of true crime and spooky stuff on this page, so make sure you follow along. Starting with this one. So this was a man who SA'd a minor, and this was the description that she gave to the police. And as you can see, this is really close. He has the big glasses that go up over his eyebrows, broad nose, really round face. Even the hairline is pretty similar. This is a woman who stole a baby from a maternity ward. And she was actually caught 10 hours after the sketch was released because she looks almost identical to it. So the witness who gave the description to the police officer for this one was actually intoxicated when he saw her. But that person basically got it identically correct. You can see her wispy bangs, super round face, the way that her hair comes down over the sides of her face. Even her eyebrow shape is perfect. These sketches were all done by a woman named Lois Gibson, who holds the Guinness World Record for most successful police sketch artist. She helped solve over 1,000 crimes in her 30-year career.
This is me after being released after 39 years in prison for a crime I never committed. I am Ricky Jackson, and in 1975 a robbery and murder occurred in a Cleveland store, in which a 13-year-old witness, Eddie Vernon, blamed me and other 2 men for being the protagonists of this act because he saw us in the area. He told them that I was the one that shot the victim, and unfortunately, they believed him. And at the age of 19, I was sentenced to death. But years later, something was discovered that would free me from this unjust sentence. My death sentence was postponed multiple times until 2014, when Eddie Vernon, who was now 52 years old, finally confessed the truth. He exposed that the police pressured him to give false evidence against me and the other 2 men to close the case. Thanks to this and other evidence, I was finally released and compensated with $1 million. Do you think that was enough to pay the 39 years?
Huge trigger warning for this video, which is one of the most disgusting UK news cases I think I've ever seen. Mark Whalley is a 71-year-old man from Manchester. At the end of last month, news broke of the horrors he had planned. The National Crime Agency had found Mark used websites to discuss his interest in children under 12 with others. Disgustingly, he'd shared explicit images with others and shared his own plans and wishes to perform hideous acts himself. Now, it was actually a tip-off from Norway that helped to catch this criminal in the act who was planning a hideous attack. Mark had spoken to someone online who claimed to have access to a 12-week-old baby. They agreed for Mark to use this child for his sickening plan. Mark arranged to meet this person at a hotel in Manchester city centre. He entered the hotel and attempted to board the lift. Officers intercepted him as he did so and detained him. He was arrested on suspicion of child abuse offences. Now, originally he had tried to claim that the officers were mistaken and he was simply meeting someone for an affair. He would eventually admit to his hideous crimes and pleaded guilty to making and distributing child P. He also confessed to arranging a child S offence and possession of extreme images. Mark's devices had already been found to have child P on them back in 2021. He's been sentenced to just 80 months in prison.
This TikToker who was a drug queen was just brutally executed in broad daylight. This is Sabrina Duran, who is a notorious drug dealer, narco queen, and TikTok influencer. Earlier this week, she was ambushed by a group of individuals who were covering their face, where they shot her multiple times, leaving her for dead, and then took her car. This is definitely cartel violence, and her death was a repercussion of something that we will probably never know. Sabrina was also released from prison about a month ago, having served a portion of her sentence involving a drug trafficking charge. And I'm guessing she either talked to somebody on the inside or they just didn't trust her anymore. The video of her being executed in broad daylight is going viral, and I'm about to explain it. It opens up with her already laying in the middle of the street, having been shot a couple times, and one of the men is grabbing her things out of her pockets. As he gets back in the car, you see Sabrina moving around like some sort of doll. It seems she can't move some parts of her body because she just got shot, and she's struggling to get up and make contact with these men. This goes on for a couple more seconds, and then the men in the car go in front of her and park it, and one of the men then gets out of the car and shoots Sabrina multiple more times, killing her on the spot. They then get back in the car and just leave her dead body in the middle of the street. This video is absolutely sickening, and I'm just waiting for more information to come out about it because it just happened. Whatever you do, don't go searching for the video because it is pretty disturbing, and hopefully within the next couple days there's more information I could cover and make another video about this.
This is Nicola Priest, a TikToker that was convicted of murdering her own 3-year-old daughter. So back in 2020, Nicola was an active TikTok user. She was constantly posting videos with her daughter, just sharing these fun moments in life of her and her daughter giggling, and she frequently posted videos of she and her daughter dancing. Lots of videos just like these. But on August 9th, 2020, this story takes a sharp and disturbing turn. On that day, Nicola and her boyfriend, Callum Redfern, were in their apartment, and 3-year-old Kaylee Jade Priest did not want to go to bed. Nicola and Caleb were really trying to do the dirty deed, if you know what I mean, but Kaylee Jade would not go to sleep. She kept coming into their room, bothering them, and for some reason, the fact that Kaylee Jade would not go to sleep awakened some sort of primal rage within the two of them. So that evening, inside of their home, the two of them beat Kaylee Jade to death together. When her body was found, Kaylee had severe abdominal and chest injuries, and according to investigators, she had been assaulted for a prolonged period of time, meaning she suffered before she died. So after the murder, neighbors came forward and claimed that they had seen Nicola abusing her daughter in public. They had seen her slap and punch her, so nobody can assume or even know what was going on behind closed doors that entire time. But what did Nicola do after her daughter's death? Well, she thought she was in the free and clear, and she immediately in the months afterwards started posting tons of TikTok videos, including this one. Yes, this is a real video where she pretends to care about her daughter's death. Eventually though, after Kaylee's autopsy and some detective work, investigators were able to determine that she wasn't dead from some sort of accident. Her own mother and her boyfriend had killed her. And so the two of them were sentenced to prison terms. Now, the sad thing about this whole story is that Nicola was only sentenced to 15 years in prison. And this was back in 2020, so that means in just 12 years, she'll be out on the streets again in England. I can't fathom how you only get 15 years for murdering your own innocent 3-year-old daughter. It's just beyond me. But yeah, this case just is so sad. It has no happy ending for anybody involved.
This is how two true crime podcast fans helped a man wrongfully imprisoned for murder. It was June 2021, and married couple Harley and Michael Girk were spending many hours travelling in the car. To pass the time on their journeys, they were listening to true crime podcasts. Specifically, they started enjoying the Crime Junkie podcast. It was through this podcast that they actually were introduced to the case of the 1981 murder of Father Patrick Ryan. Father Patrick had been brutally murdered at a motel in Odessa. After listening to the podcast, they found out that a man named James Rios was convicted of the crime, but it was a controversial ruling. The evidence was extremely weak. James was an unemployed hitchhiker at the time of the murder. When the murder actually took place, James, who had befriended the priest, was in New Mexico. Now, James had seen the priest on the night in question, but when the man was murdered, James was out of town. He even had proof of this. He had petrol receipts and even a speeding fine. The killing went unsolved, but a year later, a drunk James, who was feeling extremely guilty for hitching a ride with the priest on the night in question, actually rang police. In his drunken state, he felt he was guilty for the murder for getting a ride with him. In his phone call with police, he confessed to feeling guilty for this. Although he recanted his statement when he sobered up, it was too late. He was convicted and sentenced to 38 years in prison. Luckily, Michael, who was listening to the podcast about this case, just so happened to be the son of the chief of police in Odessa. The couple decided to see how they could help. They got Michael's dad to reread the case file, and he agreed that there was not enough evidence for a conviction. Thanks to advancements in technology, fingerprints from the original crime scene were actually found to be matches of 3 men who had since passed away. No fingerprints of James were found at the scene. Now, James actually had been released from prison in 1995, but still had a murder conviction on his record. Thankfully, due to the two true crime fans, this was about to change. The Innocence Project of Texas got involved, and James was determined to be innocent. He will receive $80,000 in restitution for spending 24 years in prison. He told the press that it was the best day of his life.
This is the tragic and sick case of Gabriel Fernandez, and this is a massive trigger warning. This is 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez, who was born and raised in Palmdale, California. And he was abused and tortured over a period of months by his own mother and her boyfriend. Gabriel lived with his grandparents until 2012, when his mother, Pearl Fernandez, regained custody of him despite concerns for his well-being from the family. And throughout his 8-month stay in the household of his mother, Pearl, and her boyfriend, he was systematically tortured and abused. The abuse included regular physical beatings causing broken bones. He was also being forced to eat cat litter and feces, his own vomit, and spoiled or expired foods. He was being burned with cigarettes and heated spoons, being shot with BB guns in various areas of his body, including the face and his groin. They also pepper sprayed him, forced him to wear women's clothing, and had him sleep bounded and gagged in a small cupboard. His teeth were also knocked out with a baseball bat. And according to Gabriel's siblings, when Gabriel's mother and her boyfriend were abusing him, they would just laugh about it. Prosecutors said that Gabriel's mother and boyfriend were motivated to abuse him because they believed he was gay. On May 22, 2013, Pearl Fernandez called 911 reporting that her child Gabriel was not breathing. Gabriel was fatally beaten by his mother and her boyfriend after failing to clean up his toys. When first responders arrived, they found him on the ground naked with several injuries. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital where doctors declared him brain dead. He died 2 days later on May 24, 2013 at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. He died at just the young age of 8 years old, and the official autopsy declared he died from blunt force trauma that coincided with neglect and malnutrition. Gabriel's mother was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and her boyfriend was sentenced to death. This is definitely one of the most sickening cases you would ever hear about or read about. I can't imagine the pain and trauma Gabriel Fernandez was going through while being tortured by his mother and her boyfriend. And this was just complete abuse. They were treating Gabriel like he wasn't even human. I wish the mother got the death penalty too, but life in prison is not good either. But rest in peace to Gabriel Fernandez, and this case is absolutely sickening. This is the murder of James Bulger, one of the most heartbreaking true crime cases ever. This is James Bulger, and he was a 2-year-old toddler living in Liverpool, England with his parents. And on February 12, 1993, he was abducted from a shopping mall in Bootle, Merseyside. His father briefly let go of his hand while they were at the mall, and John Venables and Robert Thompson, who were both 10 years old at the time, approached James and lured him away. The abduction was caught on security cameras right here, and the footage showed the two boys leading James away. And after abducting James, John Venables and Robert Thompson took him on a harrowing journey through various locations in Liverpool, during which they subjected him to severe physical and emotional abuse. And you won't believe what these two 10-year-olds did to this 2-year-old boy. They took James to train tracks where they threw blue paint into his eyes, kicked him, stomped on him, threw bricks and stones at him. They placed batteries in his mouth and may have inserted them into his anus, although none were found there. They dropped a 22-pound fish plate on his head. They hit him in the head with a metal bar countless times, which caused 10 skull fractures. James Bulger suffered so many injuries, 42 in total, that none could be identified as the fatal blow. Thompson and Venables then laid James across the railroad tracks and weighted his head down with rubble, hoping that a train would hit him and his death would be ruled as an accident. After that, they left the scene, and James Bulger's body was then cut in half by the train. James's severed body was discovered by a group of children 2 days later, and the forensics testified that James Bulger died before he was struck by the train. John Venables and Robert Thompson were charged with the abduction, torture, and murder of James Bulger. The case received widespread media attention and was deeply emotional and a controversial trial. The boys were found guilty of the charges, and they were initially sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which allowed them to be held in custody for as long as necessary. They were sent to separate secure juvenile facilities, but were eventually released on lifelong parole as young adults. The James Bulger case remains one of the most distressing and tragic true crime stories. Every time I come across this case, it just never sits right with me. I can never understand how these two 10-year-old boys could just take a 2-year-old boy away from his parents, and then proceed to brutally torture him and kill him. This case is just sickening, and let me know your thoughts on it.
This shocking case will put you off ever trick-or-treating again. Timothy O'Brien from Texas was just 8 years old on October the 31st, 1974. That evening, to celebrate Halloween, Timothy's dad Ronald took Timothy and his sister Elizabeth out trick-or-treating for the evening. Timothy's mum stayed at home while the trio went out that night. They visited one house, but the occupant didn't open the door. The two excited children ran on ahead to try another door while Ronald stayed behind. He reappeared shortly after and told his children that the owner of the house had opened the door and gave him some sweets. He showed the two children the pixie sticks that he had got from the owner. Once the trio had finished trick-or-treating, Ronald gave 3 other children the sweets in question and 1 each to both of his children. Before bed, Timothy tucked into the sweet that his dad had given him. Worryingly, he started saying that he had a really bad stomach and that the sweet tasted very bitter. The little boy started violently vomiting and convulsing. Tragically, he died on the way to hospital. Understandably, Timothy's death caused concern in the community. Who on earth would poison Halloween sweets? The autopsy revealed that Timothy had consumed a fatal dose of potassium cyanide. Local police started to gather up uneaten sweets from the local area. Luckily, this included the pixie sticks that Ronald had given to the children. It turned out that all 5 of the pixie sticks had been cut open and filled with the substance and resealed. One child even had a very narrow escape when they intended to eat the sweet but couldn't open the top. Police started to become suspicious of Ronald when they discovered that none of the houses that had trick-or-treaters that evening claimed to have given out pixie sticks. Ronald stuck with his story that these pixie sticks were from the house that they'd knocked originally and hadn't answered. He said a short time later, the lights were still off in the house and the door was cracked open just a tiny bit, and a hand reached out and gave him the sweets. Now, the home in question, it was discovered, was actually owned by a professional air traffic controller who provided proof that he was at work at time of the trick-or-treating. Police then discovered that Ronald was in huge debt and his car was about to be repossessed. He'd also suspiciously taken out life insurance policies on his 2 children just months before Timothy's death. Ronald also callously called the life insurance company to make a claim just 1 day after Timothy had died. The nail in the coffin for Ronald was that police proved that he had visited a chemical supply store in Houston to buy cyanide just before Halloween. Ronald was found guilty of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. His wife divorced him, and when she remarried, the new husband adopted Elizabeth. Ronald was given the death sentence and was executed in 1984.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there. This TikToker tried to stab and kill her own boyfriend, and she's become an infamous celebrity because of it. So this is Yuka Takeoka. She was born in 1998 in Japan, and there isn't much known about her early life, but eventually she worked her way up to become a manager at a hostess club in Japan. So Yuka seemed to be a completely normal girl. She was working a normal job, but in 2018 she met her future boyfriend, Phoenix Luna. Now, Phoenix was a worker at a different bar and nightclub in Tokyo, and immediately these two seemed to fall deeply in love. They would post TikToks together, and Yuka grew a following here on TikTok. But this story takes a dramatic and disturbing twist. So on May 23rd, 2019, when Phoenix was in the bathroom, Yuka took a look at his cell phone. He had come home 3 hours late that day due to work obligations, and Yuka took that as a sign that he may have been cheating. And when Yuka went through his phone, she found photos of him serving girls at the nightclub, which she interpreted as him cheating on her, when in reality, he was just doing his job. So on that fateful night, Yuka waited until about 3:50 in the morning to ensure that Phoenix was fully asleep. She then walked into the kitchen of their apartment, grabbed the sharpest knife that she could find. She then walked into the bedroom, sat on Phoenix's lap, and pushed the knife as hard as she could into his abdomen. Now, immediately, Phoenix got up screaming. He ran into the hallway, and he was trying to make it to the elevator when he collapsed. Now, Yuka later stated that she became then very sad, and she said that she wanted Phoenix to die, but that she also wanted to die in that moment herself. So she brought his bloody corpse down to the lobby of the apartment building, and the police were called. This led to a very infamous photo that circulated the internet. I can't post it here, but in the photo, Yuka is sitting there on her phone, smoking a cigarette, and she's covered in blood next to Phoenix's body. So Phoenix actually survived the attack, but when social media heard about this, it was set on fire. So people thought that Yuka resembled a real-life yandere, which in anime is a woman who's obsessed with a man, and when she thinks that he's cheating on her or betraying her, she becomes a homicidal maniac obsessed with her lover. And admittedly, that is kind of what happened here. But people have taken this way too far. They are selling shirts with Yuka's photo on it, and there is tons of fan art of that exact picture of her covered in her boyfriend's blood. I mean, there are so many images of this. I cannot believe that people actually sit down, put their pen to paper, and draw this kind of crap. So Phoenix survived, and Yuka was eventually sentenced to a few years in prison for attempted murder. But this once again just goes to show that you can't tell who a person is by their social media. You could be sitting in a bar, posting a funny lip-syncing video, laughing all night, and then later that evening try to stab your boyfriend to death in your apartment.
Bradford's defo the most requested place. You want a case from Bradford, Mush? Here's a case from Bradford. This is Tony Grant, and this is Mohammed Nisar Khan, known as Meggy. In October 2018, 40-year-old Amriz Iqbal was walking along Sanford Road with a friend that's in Bradford Moor. Khan and Grant were driving a Kia Sedona, and they just drove straight at Mr. Iqbal and his friend, killing Mr. Iqbal in the process. I couldn't really find the reason as to why this happened. The motive for it seemed to not exist. Mr. Khan was a criminal, is a criminal, as is Mr. Grant, but couldn't really find out why the attack actually happened or whether it was just a random attack on two people in the road. Mr. Khan was jailed for life, or 26 years, and Mr. Grant was jailed for life, or 17 years. Where should I cover next? You bet I won't find any case from Harrogate. Here's a case from Harrogate. This is Daniel Liam Ainsley of Mayfield Grove in Harrogate. On March 5th, 2020, Daniel killed his 48-year-old friend Mark Walsey. Daniel was taken to hospital before the killing to get more medication. He claimed that Mark had stolen his. After leaving the hospital, he went to Asda, bought a set of knives, took one out of the packet and discarded the rest, went back to his bedsit and stabbed and killed Mark. Mark had suffered 37 wounds and Daniel had left the knife sticking out of his chest. November 24th, 2021, Daniel was handed a life sentence with a minimum term to serve of 22 years. He initially pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but the jury changed it to guilty of murder. Where should I cover next?
Some are calling this the most horrific fraternity hazing ever in the United States. This is how one night at university can destroy your life forever. Danny Santulli was 18 years old and a freshman at the Uni of Missouri. In October 2021, Danny was captured on CCTV being blindfolded and led downstairs in an event named Pledge Dad Reveal Night. Danny was made to drink a litre of straight vodka by himself. At around 10:55, Danny collapsed and some of the frat members were seen carrying him to a sofa. Around midnight, Danny was captured on cameras sliding off the sofa, and shortly after he was found unconscious with blue lips. Shockingly, instead of calling an ambulance for Danny, the frat members piled him into a car, dropping him on the way. They drove him to hospital, but at this point he was already in cardiac arrest. Danny had to be resuscitated and spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Prior to this evening, Danny had been left needing stitches and crutches after he'd been forced to climb inside of a bin with broken glass inside. 2 nights before the night in question, Danny broke down in tears on the phone to his sister and told her about how stressed he felt about it all. His family had begged him to quit the pledge, but he didn't want to be ridiculed. This is Danny now. He will need full-time care for the rest of his life. He's now severely brain damaged, is blind and cannot walk or talk. 2 former students are set to go to trial over this case. This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.